All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And if you're watching this later, thank you for watching the replay too. Hope you get a chance to learn a little bit about some strategic thinking. If you have an opportunity or a question or a comment that you want to, you can raise your hand. You can add it in the chat as we go as well. I'm open to talking through it with you, but we've got a lot to cover here in 45 minutes. So I'm going to jump into it. So a quick poll in the chat just to get people started. What percentage of your time, of your week, do you spend in either Jira or Azure DevOps or Linear in some of these new cases, or working in stand-ups or writing tickets versus the things that can sometimes matter more that you want to be doing, like thinking about strategy? So put it in the chat whether you got 25% of your time is spent on some of those stand-up type of items and writing tickets versus 75% in strategy, or if it's vice versa, going the other way. So let's see what we got. So far, C. Oh, you got, okay. Yeah, C and B's pretty good, 50-50. So we got a couple that are leaning more towards the execution there. Okay, good to know. Okay, so C. So a lot that really, maybe you do a little bit of strategy, but you don't necessarily have a lot of time to do that because you've got a lot of execution. And so when I've been talking to different product managers, I find some similar statistics. So when I think about product managers, I often see them actually working more as a delivery manager. What do I mean by that? So if your week is mostly managing Jira tickets, running stand-ups, gathering and writing requirements, I dislike the word requirements entirely. I'll tell you more about that at some other point in time, or updating stakeholders. If you think about if that's what your week is mostly, I have an unfortunate thing to tell you, that you're not necessarily a product manager, but you're a delivery manager with a fancier title. But I want you to know that you're not necessarily alone in this. So when I talk to different product managers that are out there, I find that probably 80% of them are operating this way, where they execute roadmaps that others are creating. So it's somebody else's roadmap that is just our job to execute on it. And really what we should be titling those and what those teams should be hiring is for a different kind of role. Because what we want is at least a product manager that's balancing delivery with some strategy. It looks like most of you have an opportunity to do at least some strategy, and that's great. You're going to veer into that product management lane. But where we want to get you over time is into that 5%, where you're owning business outcomes across all 4 pillars of product management, which I'll explain a little bit more in a second. So we're going from just pure execution to now thinking about real ownership of different outcomes. So the life of most product managers, they start with an expectation that they're in the driver's seat. They're driving a finely tuned machine like a race car, and they're able to steer it on the track wherever they need to go. Their product team is right behind them, and they need to get going here. But the reality is that we often see that, oh, some either manager, leader, stakeholder is really driving that. And it just looks like we have the appearance of control when we don't. We're on a track that somebody else has provided and going at the speed that somebody else wants us to go. And when we think about that, it's not that the leaders are our problem that's creating the situation. When I talk to a lot of executives, they actually want something from their product managers that they can't articulate. And they don't want to be doing a product manager's job. They're actually frustrated by having to do that. They want their product managers to be able to do that strategic thinking job, but they want somebody that they can trust. The situation is, though, they have to see it first. They have to see you expressing the strategic thinking for them to be able to take their hand off the control and potentially hand it over to you. They want the real kind of product owner. And I'm not talking about the one that is popularized by SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, or Scrum in general. I'm talking about a product owner of the real sense of owner, one that's entrepreneurial. Somebody that's proactive, seeing the bigger picture, the forest through the trees. So thinking ahead, looking beyond just today, not just what's in your backlog today, but where are we going to be going in a few years from now? Thinking about your whole company's success, and just instead of just your individual product success, you're a part of a larger organization most likely, and you need to be thinking about how does the company grow? Because that's really what matters for your company and not just your individual products, because you got to be thinking about your whole team. And that includes more than just your product teams, but the whole team that operates going in one direction, and thinking about that impact you're having over your personal promotions. Too many people are focused on how can I get the next job up? And because they don't see the impact of their role and their job, and so status and prestige end up mattering more. But a true product manager that can focus and show that impact that they're having, they get rewarded with promotions faster than anyone else. So what executives really want is somebody that can move the company forward. They want somebody that can drive outcomes and not simply more output. So if you have a ship and move on type of delivery mentality, it's going to create more features, but not necessarily the meaningful results. What do I mean by that? If we look at, we're trying to finish a feature to spec and finish it on time, and then we celebrate that and we celebrate shipping, we're looking at this incorrectly. What we need to be thinking about is the outcome that we had intended. We had a hypothesis. There's a reason that this feature was in the backlog to begin with. And we need to know, did it work? Did it solve the problem that we thought it would? If not, we keep iterating until it is solved. And then we celebrate the impact that we're having. And that's what a strategic product manager ends up doing with their deliveries, making sure that they have that impact. And if you think that this whole outcomes over outputs thing is a cliche, it's getting a bit tiresome out there, but it's not necessarily one. Ask yourself this question. Is the company better off because of you? How do you know that's true? How do you know, can you articulate the impact you're having? If your measurement of success is features shipped and that's what you're putting on your resume, then you're missing out on so much more. So let's talk about how you can get there. How can you show that impact? To grow into this comprehensive product management role of what it is that's much more beyond delivery, you need to be thinking about all the different elements of product management. So these 4 pillars. You've got things like product strategy, which we're going to talk a lot about today. You've got product delivery, which is where most product managers sit. You've got customer experience and adoption and growth. And this hourglass framework, what it does is it takes us from an experience of where we need to interact with the market, the prospects and customers. And what we're going to do is distill all of that into a certain focus area. We're going to choose what we're going to bet our company and our product team on. And that's what product strategy is about, is making a specific choice. And from there, in delivery, we expand on the solution. We figure out what are all the bells and whistles that we need to be able to solve this problem effectively and efficiently. But from there, when we get into customer experience, this is more than just user experience design. This is, how do you simplify everything about your product that your customer interacts with, or even your company? How do you simplify all this? Can you distill the messaging down and simplify it? Can you make the onboarding super easy? Can you make the support experience very simple? Once you have those simple elements, then it's time to then go into adoption and growth and distribute this broadly. So you're going to go back out to the market and expand upon that message. And whether you have a product that drives sales because it's revenue generating, or if it's one that's internally focused, you still need adoption and growth. And you need to know how to motivate that, because that's where your impact actually happens. People using your product and getting a value out of it. Question from Shiva: what if the executive sees you as a threat when you as the product owner are doing a good job of being strategic, and so they have you do only the delivery part? Sometimes people can be threatened. And I'll go through a thing at the very end about how you can bring in those executives that might be threatened with, oh, you're taking their job because you're able to think strategically. One, it's not necessarily an organization you want to be in. If that's the case, where people are already trying to push you down, you want an organization that does try to grow you. I always think about, how do I make myself obsolete by growing the team that I have so that they can do what I do, so that I can do more? That's what most good executives really want, but they don't often articulate it. But I will show you a technique towards the end about how you can bring them into the conversation, and so they're not so much threatened by you. There's also another webinar I did on how can you transition or transform stakeholder demands into strategic wins. You can go back and watch that one. That one uses a lot of discharging the emotion of conflict and bringing now some logic into the conversation that you could use as a technique to try to pivot upon that. All right, so there's a lot into this 4 pillars of product management. I can't go through everything today in this time frame. If you want to learn more about practical tips and what each one of these stages is really about, you can go to my website at unabatedproducts.com and download a free guide there. Then you've got like 30 pages of being able to go through some practical things for each one of those. You want to dig into adoption and growth and know how to help with sales? I'll go through and show you how to do a couple of those things too. All right, so overall, each one of these different areas has some major categories of activities and goals. If you want to become a great product manager, you need to go out and dig into what are the skills that you want to work on next. And this job is so grand and comprehensive. It is too difficult to try to learn this from a 45-minute webinar and cover everything. So you want to go through and look at each individual element and then map out where you are today and where you want to be in, let's say, 6 months. So if you want to expand into product strategy, so if you're all the way on that delivery focus, which a lot of people are, how do we expand into things like product strategy, maybe a little bit into the sales and adoption and growth, some into the customer experience? Plot out your learning and your growth journey. Take control of where you want to go. And so then you have now a strategy for yourself about the plan to get there. Okay, so most product managers, they start out and they stay. Unfortunately, they get trapped in product delivery. So we're going to talk about how to expand into the adjacent areas and specifically into product strategy today. So let's get into strategic thinking. How do we practice that? What is it? What do we even define it as? So it's really a simple process that may not be that easy, but it's definitely simple. So when we start out, we observe, then we quantify, and then we plan. Okay, so let's talk about how we can do that in just a few minutes. What we figure out is that strategy is not about imagination. It's about synthesis. We're going to observe something. We're going to then do some analysis on it and then map out a plan, right? It's nothing to do with a blank canvas and being a visionary leader. You can construct a vision through an analytical mind as well. Now, you need to be thinking about how to tell the story in a way that inspires, and that's where that charisma and storytelling can make you look like a visionary type of person. But a lot of people get stuck and they're like, oh, I'm not a strategic thinker. You don't have to be one that is labeled as the same way as you see with Steve Jobs, but you do need to be able to synthesize information and give a path of success. So first, what we're going to do is observe, and observe with purpose. Why are we observing? To try to find opportunities to bet our company and our product team on. Here's a simple process of doing so. We're going to use something called a vision triangle framework, and we're going to picture a new world for our customer, not a picture for our product. We're not trying to come up with solution ideas here and talk about our product having success. We need to always constantly be anchoring ourselves on what is it that's going to be different in the lives of our customer that we can help them accomplish. And that's what we're going to be looking for when we observe and look for opportunities. So the first part of the triangle is your customer truth. What have you discovered that others don't see? You need to have an informed opinion for people to even think that you might have any strategic muscle in you. You need to go out and actually do some discovery. The scary thing is, oh, I've got to go and talk to customers. Yes, that is exactly it. I recommend to every new product manager that wants to know, what can I be doing today that can make me more fulfilled in my job? What can I be doing today to try to get ready for the next level? What can I be doing to show people the impact of my work? It all starts with have one conversation with one customer, and it could be a current user or a potential prospect. Either way, I call it as all customers. It doesn't matter. You need to be able to have some sort of opinion about their life and maybe discover something that they don't even see themselves. So you find a customer truth first. So something that might be unique. It doesn't have to be completely unique. It could just be a trend that you're seeing that most others don't see. It could be out there already in a competitor world. But either way, you've got some element. Then you need to say, why now? First, why this problem is your customer truth, then why now? There's a market shift that's happening. So whether that's a new technology coming out like AI, or it could be a new regulation. It could be changes in the way that our economy or our consumers behave. Remote work with COVID, everything that all changed. There's a new opportunity that's available now that makes sense for why we should approach this problem in a new lens that wasn't there for before. And lastly, why us? So maybe why me individually? What do I know that's unique? What do I know that is different? And what do I have in, as far as my experience goes, that is my unfair advantage? You could also be thinking about this for what does your company have that's an unfair advantage? Do they have an experience in some area that allows them to be able to move forward? When you bring all of these three things together, you're synthesizing a set of problems that you see customers have and an opportunity, new trends that are happening in the market, and some unique capabilities. And somebody is drawing on my screen somehow. Did not know that I gave permission to do that. So we're going to go through how do you bring this together? We're going to synthesize this all into a vision. And the vision doesn't have to be the Steve Jobs thing, like I mentioned before, and it doesn't have to be at the whole company level. It can be all the way down at a feature level. In fact, this is what you're going to be doing at each new feature that you're going to be creating. You have to be able to convey a situation that is different for your customer. What's going to be different for your customer? We're going to follow a Mad Lib of a world where a customer can achieve some sort of outcome without experiencing some sort of friction that they have. So it could be an implied friction or a stated explicitly. So let's look at it at the company level. We've got Amazon. They've got a portfolio of offerings. They've got a world where customers can find and discover anything that they might want to buy online. That's a world where their customers can do something that they couldn't necessarily do before. So that's at the big company level. Let's look at it as if you want to describe this vision for your product. A world where everyone has access to all music instantly. Okay. Now for Spotify, they turned into a very large company based upon their product, but that was the initial vision that they had. You can even do this at the lower level for the feature here. Let's talk about one of my favorite features that in the Apple iOS is when you're logging into a new website, you've got to have these security codes that you get texted to you. They have a feature that allows you to copy and paste that from the text message without having to go and switch screens to do. So you could even do this at the very lowest level. A world where people logging in don't have to type or copy or paste from security codes from those text messages. So when you think about your customer truth and you're interviewing customers, I want you to ask some better questions. First is, don't ask customers about your product. That's not the intention of a customer interview. You're not there to ask them about how they use your product. Yeah, you're going to do that sometimes in usability studies, but the point is, I want you to make sure that you're talking about their lives, their world. Okay, remember the vision is about a change in their world potentially. So you have to understand their current world to be able to articulate a change to it and where they want to be going. So ask questions like, what does your day look like? What does your job entail? How are you measured? What does your boss care about? What does your boss's boss? What does your boss report up to their boss? How can you tell what the CEO is pushing this year? So these are questions you want to be asking in your interviews that talk more about the buyer level things, really what's happening in their company so that you can tie some of the customer individual user needs up to the things that their organization cares about. So this matters in B2B mostly when I'm talking about these things, but it's also at the higher level in B2C. What is it that your consumer is trying to get done in their life? And they hire your product to do a very small part of that job to be able to do something. You want to know what those are. Now, in a B2B sense, another set of tricky questions that are my favorites. If your boss's boss got fired, what would they have done wrong? If your boss's boss got promoted for results, what would they have accomplished? This tells you some things that the staff might not be able to articulate through OKRs. They may not know the metrics of success that their company have at the lowest level, but they can tell you the gossip part of it. And they can tell you generally, what is it the company, what do they care about by their promotion and their firing type of mentality here? This gives me clues into knowing that if I take one of these user problems and I connect it to a bigger challenge and a bigger need and desire at the company level, I've got a winning formula on my hands. And now I've got a problem that matters. It doesn't just matter to the individual users. I can relate it to what the rest of the company cares about. And so next we're going to turn all of these insights into math. We're going to quantify everything that we can. So let's say that we mapped out our customer's job. I recommend mapping a customer's job visually, doing a customer journey mapping like this. And then what you've now figured out is they're trying to accomplish something with those questions that you've asked. They're trying to accomplish these job success metrics. What does it mean if they do their job really well? How are they measured? How are they incentivized? And then you now know, okay, what does user success look like? But these people weren't hired and they don't have a job just to use your product. That's not the point of their job. Their point of their job is to say, I want to have success with your product, but to influence a department, to influence our company objectives. They were hired into an organizational structure, a business unit, a department, so that they could move something forward. And that department was created so that the company could have success in some area. So they might roll up to the financial department. They might roll up to some sort of operations. What is it that they're contributing to the overall company's success? And that's where the executives live. Whether these are executives in your company or executives in your customer's company, that's the language that they speak at the very top level. And sometimes those leaders don't even know the pain points that their staff is going through. They might only see the results at the end. So you have to tie their pain points and the individual features you'll be creating up to the results that they'll have that influence their company's business. And if you can do this, then you're able to articulate the reason for building these features that you've been thinking about. And this is strategic thinking. So also, if you have metrics, you're now able to tell that story that I was implying by using numbers to make a meaningful argument. And there's numbers at everything, every step along the way of telling a story. A narrative arc includes a character, a setting, a conflict, and a resolution. And you're going to have numbers that can be applied to all these different things too. So if you're talking about your character, who's your main character that's facing a challenge? How many of them are there? Can you describe their characteristics in some way with numbers? Where do they sit? What kind of operation do they work in? And then what's your quantity of evidence? How many people have you talked to? What studies have you done that show the trends that you're looking at in the market? What was happening before? Can you measure their current situation? How long does it take them to get through a job or a single task? What's the current baseline measurement performance at each one of those steps? Then you've got this conflict. Conflict can be either a positive change opportunity. Hey, we're going to try to move somebody from this stage of pain to this stage of no pain, or whatever it might be. Hey, here's a positive change. We're always going to be doing that. But you can also think about a negative change in some way. There's a new challenge that's been introduced, a threat to these customers, or a new opportunity. Now with AI, we think we could cut down on time spent in this task by 90%. Okay, so we see the gap there. That's your goal. You can quantify the gap and change between the baseline and where we think we're going to be going as your goal. Quantify the amount of pain that they have today or the missed opportunity that they're trying to get to. And then lastly, once you have a solution in mind, then or actually delivered, you can quantify the value delivered to those customers. How much did you move them from the current pain point to less pain? How much was changed? What's the improvement in performance? And then what's the ROI for your customers? What's the ROI for yourself as well? So all of this, you can use numbers or metrics to tell these better stories. If you don't know how to get to some of these, I'm going to give you some questions that you want to start answering in metrics format. So the first two are not necessarily metric oriented, but who's the specific person or persona that we're talking about? I love to ask entrepreneurs, product managers, tell me a real name of a real person that you've talked to that has a real pain point. I want to start as small as possible. And I want to make sure that you've actually done some research here, some homework, and talked to somebody. I'm not talking about imaginary people. You've done synthetic research with AI and ChatGPT. I'm talking about a real customer with a real challenge that has tried solving it before. Okay. Then I can take that a little bit further. I want to know, okay, tell me about the problem now. Now that I know who we're talking about, what's their problem or what are they missing out on? Okay. I've got these two that are not necessarily math oriented, but now I'm going to get into the numbers part. How often does that problem arise for them? How often are they trying to do this and missing out? Is this a one time a year type of thing, or is it one time a day? How quickly or how frequently is it happening? When it happens, how much does it cost them every time? Or what do they have to do in an alternative now because of this problem? Do they have a workaround? How long does it take them to do the workaround? Quantify that pain of the individual instance of the problem. So I've got frequency of the problem, how often it occurs, how much pain it is every time it occurs. And then I want to understand what's the prevalence of this person. So I now have a name of Mark or Sally or whatever. And now I'm going to say, how many more Marks and Sallys are there that are out there? I'm going to multiply my market prevalence of this total problem per customer. And then I'm going to turn it into a hypothesis for me, turn it into a formula. If we helped all of those Marks and Sallys with the problem at this frequency, how much do we think that we could now gain from this as well? So if we've got the total value per customer is the frequency times the problem, quantified pain, and we divide that by 10, let's say it's $1,000 of value per customer, we're going to charge them a tenth of that. That's value-based pricing if we think about it. Great results as far as ROI goes for our customer. That we're only going to get $100 from them, but it's still enough to then say there's thousands and thousands of Marks and Sallies out there. We're going to now multiply that $100 times 50,000, right? And we can get to 5 million from there. So that's our revenue. We're going to turn all this into math so we can tell better stories. And if nothing else, what you're doing here by doing this is connecting up your features to customer value outcomes, which then relate to business outcomes here. So real quick, we're going to go from a feature to influence a product metric. Why are we even building this feature? We need to answer that question. It should be so that something changes in our customer's life within the product first, and then eventually they're able to accomplish a job from end to end in the product, which then helps them achieve some sort of objective outside of our product. And if we do that, whether that's efficiency or revenue that they're trying to gain by using our product, we can then relate that to our own business outcome. By creating customer value first, then we can capture some of it for ourselves. So if you're going to do nothing else with this quantification, is tie your features to some sort of measurable impact. Once you do that enough times, you're going to then start to be able to prioritize well, and you're going to be able to explain, why are we doing this first versus that? That's where your strategy can come from, because you have analytical reasoning as to why we're going in this order. You can do this with your entire backlog. So I went from bottoms up to all the way to the customer outcome. You can also go from top down. What are your customers trying to accomplish, whether they have your product or not? Then within your product, your users are trying to achieve something as part of their job, okay, that helps with that overall outcome. How would we measure that we're doing that really well for our users? And then we can brainstorm at the very bottom, what are some things we could do to improve those metrics? So you can go top down, bottom up, use this for your entire backlog, use it for your existing feature set as well, for your product marketing. You can use this product metrics ladder in a lot of different ways to communicate, why is this feature here? And what's the impact we intend to have if we build these things? Okay, the last step in now creating your strategy is to plan it out. What's the path you're going to be taking? You got this great vision with the vision triangle. You've quantified the potential if you solve for all of that. But now, how are you going to practically get there? Maybe this is a couple years out. That's your strategy. A strategy is just really that plan to try to get to the vision with the impact that you intend. So you can choose milestones that can build on each other, and you can go forwards from where you are today to try to get to that vision of the future. So let's look at forwards, and then we'll look at backwards. So first is, you're going to start with a very small acute pain for a small group of people, because you're going to try to prove problem solution fit. So what's the first step to proving it out before you go and investing a ton in this solution? Let's make sure that you've got the right solution first. Then we can move into product market fit. Let's expand from those early evangelists now into your early adopters. And let's see, can we broaden the needs that we're covering with a product or a solution here, and make sure that enough people are buying before we then go further with it, where we can extend into new value propositions. We can extend into new areas. We can go deeper with those same customers. And if we want, then is we can then scale and go beyond those into new markets, whatever it is. So what are some practical steps that build on each other so that you're not over investing to build this vision without proving it along the way? You can also move backwards. So think about it this way. So you got this great vision. What is one thing that must be true for us to actually make that possible? Maybe it's a foundational thing we have to build. Maybe it's something we need to prove to ourselves that enough customers want this before we go out and can do this further. So ask yourself, what's one thing that makes this possible? Then you go, what's one proof point that makes this argument believable, this approach believable? And what's one feature that can help us then create that proof that then makes that foundation possible, that makes the vision a likely success? And then lastly, what's one thing I can do today? What's one thing I can do today that's going to move us forward? You're going to be doing this every day, every sprint, every month, every quarter, every year, trying to think about what is the one most important thing that our team can be doing to move us forward. And that's where your strategy comes from, is you choosing the most impactful thing that your product team or yourself or your company can be doing. Strategy isn't about doing a whole bunch of building a bunch of stuff. It's about knowing what is the thing that's going to have the most likely impact or the highest impact on our goals. And if you don't have any goals, you need to go back to step 2 and quantify them and figure out what the goals are. As you're making through every step along the way, you can ask yourself these advanced strategic questions. So each milestone, let's say we're building part of a product and we're proving it out with part of a market, and we're going to eventually extend the product over time. At each step, will customers tell others about this new thing, this new problem we're solving? Does it create enough observable value? So these imply that there are other people with this problem that they're willing to tell, and that you've done it so well, you've solved their problem so well, better than their alternatives. So think about that. You're not just shipping something. You need to qualify, is this enough to be able to really delight our customers? Does it also create an advantage for us, a moat? If you see that moat around the castle, what's the unfair advantage that we have? Can we now grow that unfair advantage where it's harder for other competitors to build this type of solution for us? How can we now create that further moat and make this a virtuous cycle that compounds over time? If it's a network advantage, the more customers you have, does that create more data for your product to then make your product better at personalization or prediction or whatever it might be, which then increases more customers to come on because you're creating more value. And so that it becomes a virtuous cycle that the bigger you get, the harder it is for somebody to match you. And then lastly, you need to have a little bit of financial acumen. Does this improve unit economics, which is basically your profit per transaction? Does that go up by making this choice? Are you actually adding something to the bottom line with each one of the features you're building? Does it allow you to justify charging more, or can it actually reduce your costs internally as you're going forward? So think about your margin. Delight, hard to copy, margin enhancing. In the end, you have to create a strategy that answers certain questions. Which customers are we going after first? Which problem of the millions that are out there are we going to target first? Which capabilities do we need to build to solve those problems for those specific customers first? And what do we say not yet to? Our vision before really says no to certain things. That's not part of the vision. It's not something that even makes sense for these sets of customers to change their life. So the vision says no to things. The strategy says not yet. No, it doesn't make sense here. It makes sense here in our plan later on. And once you have a good strategy, what does it do? A good strategy inspires your team to now hustle, because now their work matters. Before, they didn't know. They were just shipping things. But now they know the reason for it, and they know the direction that we're going. It provides confidence to executives, to your leaders, that we will win with this direction. And a good strategy clarifies how teams and individuals should make decisions. They should be able to make decisions about how we should build this feature without you in the room all the time. You shouldn't constantly be spending your time in the stand-up just answering questions for developers. You should be looking out for the future, and they should have a rubric for how to make choices about the solutions. This quote embodies what a good product manager, a strategic product manager, does with their strategy. I don't think Antoine de Saint-Exupéry was a product manager itself hundreds of years ago, but I think that he embodied really what a product manager should bring out in their strategy. He says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum people up together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work. Rather, teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. So you can think about this. Hey, there's no Jira tickets in here. That's not the point of our job. The point isn't to try to keep a development team busy. The point is to try to motivate and inspire people to want to do more and be able to create alongside you, to give them that vision of the future and a reason for doing the work that they're doing. Yes, they might contribute this small part of it, but they know that they're on a mission together to try to accomplish this for their customers, for your business, and for the change in the world that you want to help them see. So lastly, you got to communicate your strategy. So now you've got a strategy. How do you communicate it? Oh, you're going to tell me, oh, most product managers don't get a chance to deliver strategy presentations. That's true, because 80% are already doing somebody else's roadmap. Okay, fine. But what if you could show off your strategic thinking without having any formal presentation? That sounds like a vision, a world where PMs can show leaders that they're ready for the next level without waiting for permission to be able to present something. So how will we do that? I have a solution for you too, because I have studied you as my customer market as well and tried this out. This has changed many careers, and it is a simple preparation that you need to do that can help you have a conversation in less than 60 seconds and show your strategic thinking. Okay, so you may not be doing a big presentation, but you can do it this way. First is remind the person what you're working on, because oftentimes your boss or your boss's boss doesn't remember. They don't remember the last thing you guys talked about. Okay, so make it simple. I'm building this type of solution for these type of people that have this kind of problem, this need. Okay, here the point is don't get into features. You're just setting a baseline of context to remind them. Don't get lost in this, because then they'll start to zone off, right? You don't want to do that. You want to get into something that's interesting for them. Next is you want to slowly do a little humble brag here around, hey, you want to hear this. We just shipped something. We achieved something. We proved something that helps our customers even more. And we saw this result. So you're anchoring upon the product metrics of your customer or something that stakeholder cares about if you're talking about a business improvement. Hey, you want to just say, yeah, we're doing this and we're doing a great job. And you, again, make it very quick and just a simple share here. And here's where you're going to turn that advocate into leaning in a little bit more. Hey, I found out something interesting though. Oh, you're going to build some intrigue. Yeah, when I talked to this customer, this other business company, this expert in this space, we noticed a pattern of this to explore. So if you haven't done your customer truth interviewing exercises in your market research, you won't have anything to share. You need to have an informed opinion for this reason. So you can share, hey, here's something interesting that we found. This gets them to lean in, and then you bring them in to the conversation. Hey, what would you think if we did something like Y for that X problem that we noticed? What would you do in my situation? So I know that, I think it was Shiva had the question earlier around, how do you work with people that might feel threatened? In this case, this isn't threatening at all. You're actually bringing them into a conversation in a positive way. So after you ask that question, what would you do in my situation? You get some answer out of them. You say, we're only here for 60 seconds. So I'd love maybe 15 minutes to show you how we're approaching it. Does Thursday work, right? Set up some way to book a meeting from a meeting. That's a BAM acronym. So always you want to be able to set yourself up for the next situation to where you can then have even more success to build on what you've got. And then gracefully close. We're not going to go and get into all these feature details because then people get bored. You want to leave them on a high note, an intriguing, interesting note. So perfect. I'll send you a brief beforehand if you want to meet. And if not, then I'll send you a one pager. I'm going to send you the same thing either way. And then you can tell me if you want more details. This is bringing you into that conversation around strategic thinking and showing that without saying, hey, I want to have a formal strategy presentation that threatens somebody else, or like, hey, my job is strategy. No, in this case, you're bringing insights to help them maybe make better decisions about your product too, if they're the ones that are doing it. But you're showing, look, I'm doing my research. I'm coming up with a thoughtful opinion here, and I'm thinking through ideas as well with our team. Remember, so strategy isn't about imagination. It's about synthesis. And what we've just done is we synthesized all that information that you've created through your research, and you put it into a 60-second little elevator pitch there for yourself. So at the end, we've gone through the 4 pillars of product management. We've talked through how to observe, quantify, and plan to create your strategy with the vision triangle, product metrics ladder. You've got your expanding strategic milestones working forwards or backwards. You've got your delight, hard to copy, and margin enhancing strategic questions. And then you've got your cafe update, where you're meeting somebody in a cafe or a virtual coffee as well can work with one of these. This was just a sliver of one of the classes that we go through in one course. If you want to go deeper on things like this, so we've got one module just on vision strategy. If you want to know how to get the data that goes into your vision strategy, we've got a whole bunch of other classes that go through it. So if you want to learn how to become a more influential PM, you can join me on Maven for my course. The current one we're in, it got sold out. I've got a new one coming up in January. So January 19th through February 19th is a 4-week course. And actually, you're in a perfect spot. Maven is doing a once-a-year sale For certain courses that are a part of their fast track program, they're 25% off through Monday. So Monday the 24th. And my course qualifies for that too, as one of the top rated product strategy courses. It's also top rated in product career growth. So if you want to take advantage of your L&D credits before the end of the year, you can use it now and then actually take a course that's in January or March as well. So go to Maven. There's a whole bunch of courses that are all on sale to be able to invest in yourself. All right, let's turn it over to questions. I think I am just a couple minutes over that 45-minute line. Let's see what people have. At least I know there are some questions in the chat, and then I'll open it up also to other questions you have. Okay, why do you need to have a unique existing capability for a new strategy? Capabilities can be built by learning and are hiring to those capabilities. I do agree that unfair advantage accelerates buy-in strategy, but it doesn't have to be existing capability. It could be a stable customer base that is your unfair advantage. Okay, so you might have an unfair advantage. Absolutely. So if you don't have one, then you need to go get one. It is, why are you the right ones to play in that market? If you don't have it, you're right, go get it. So you could hire somebody if you're an entrepreneur. You could go out and do a job rec if you don't have a data scientist and you want a product that can help with that. Absolutely. So you do need one, as you're saying. Either way, you need to go get one somehow. All right, regarding your boss's boss, is it unreasonable to expect those strategies, goals, and KPIs are shared by those leaders? Why wouldn't they set that strategy and disseminate it down? Yes, that's the ideal, is that they do. But in my experience, it is not all that common. People imply that there's some sort of strategy, or they might have a grand vision of something, but it doesn't necessarily communicate down to how we should operate. If you do operate in one of those companies that has very great objectives and key results, and you know that your work today contributes to those OKRs, which then rolls up all the way, amazing, great. You're in a great spot, and you should continue to work there and see if you can climb. But most people don't have that situation. And so what you can do is help to create some of that structure that your colleagues are sorely missing. And I know that I've seen this over and over again. All right, a product with big shiny feature is ready for release. A few days before release, the sales engineer plays around with the build and finds 6 to 7 UX issues, okay, which can frustrate users even though it technically works. Would you release the product per original plan date or fix the issues and then release? Customers have already waited 6 months and UX fixes will take 4 to 5 weeks. Okay, so practical scenario here about whether to move forward. I would always measure the opportunity cost of different things. So you can now say, okay, we know that if this bug is related to a critical piece of the flow, okay, and that if it happens, what percentage of our users are going to be affected? What percentage of them are now going to create a pain point? So just like we did in our customer interviews and customer journey mapping, we're going to map out what's the quantified pain that's in here. So they're not able to do this. And then if they're not able to do this, are they going to leave our product and never come back? Okay. If that's the case, then what is the alternative opportunity cost? So waiting 4 to 5 weeks. Okay. What's the potential there? Is it that somebody's waiting and we're going to lose a major deal because of it? If they say, oh, 4 to 5 weeks, that's too long, I'm not going to sign anymore. Or 4 to 5 weeks of, we've got customers that are about to sign up and they were thinking about this feature. In all likelihood, it's most likely that if you've got a critical issue, you don't want to release, because creating the negative friction for your existing users is typically a greater issue than potentially other people not wanting to use your product because it's just not quite there yet. You're always going to be improving upon your product. So you do need to turn this into math, though, to make a practical decision, because this hypothetical scenario, you can't make a decision just on this. You have to be able to then quantify this potential impact and talk about the opportunity costs. It may make sense to deliver it without it if it's not a critical situation. I actually recommend some situations you want to create technical debt instead of removing it all the time. People think, oh, I'm going to always allocate time to remove tech debt. No, sometimes you want to create it. And the reason why is you have hypotheses. And so shipping a crappy version of your feature or product and seeing if it has at least some indication that it's going to be helpful, that's what you might want to do early versus investing a year trying to make sure that it's perfect. So you actually want to create tech debt. Sometimes you want to introduce things that are non-perfect because it's supposed to help you learn something that'll help you grow from there if the consequences of getting it wrong are low. Okay, how do I come up with a strategic roadmaps or initiatives in a slow-moving industry? Can you name your industry? I've been in a few that are slow-moving. Some are enterprise because the sales cycle are very long. And so we don't get feedback on things that are working or not in those cases. So you have to almost manufacture iterations in some other way. How are you going to learn faster than what the market does on an annual basis? So if you wait till enterprise sales happen once a year as your proof point, then you're typically not going to have enough. And you might want to come up with a proxy metric ahead of that, which I don't have time to cover all the proxy metrics, but so you got legacy financial services. So things have been done this way for decades, right? So that's always the way we're going to be doing it. And I don't want you to change the product too much. This actually is related probably more so to the maturity of the market and the product. In some cases, you don't want to move fast. Your reason for being is something different. So if you have an early stage startup, your reason to exist as a product manager is to prove product market fit. Thanks, Shiva. See you next time. Then if you're in a growth stage product, your purpose as a product manager is to help find the levers to get the most customers to onboard successfully and then grow and tell their friends about it. Once you get to a late and majority stage product operating, you're now going to switch to say, I'm not going to think about new innovation. That's not the point. There's not enough juice to squeeze out of the market anymore. We've already saturated the market with our competitors. All I'm going to do is start optimizing. So what we're going to do is we're going to find ways to improve our operational efficiency or find slightly ways to improve our pricing here. So we're actually going to slow down on our introduction of new features and tests. And that's good because we want to improve our operational profit metrics. And then sunsetting products is you want to just milk it. You want to say, what's the minimum maintenance we can do to maximize profit until this thing is ready to sunset? James, in some of your cases, it actually does make sense not to come up with some whiz-bang strategy. You might want to look at adjacent markets to then create new strategic roadmaps. Or if there's a disruptive technology that could eventually replace what you've got, then you might want to invest in that. But your current product may be not so much a strategic initiative there. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I know we're over. If there's anything else anybody wants to add, please do. You're welcome, Sarah. You're welcome, Gavin. Any tools that can help in strategic thinking? I went through a couple frameworks here. One that I like is just practicing making predictions. So I'm going to say, I'm going to observe something in the market. Where do I think things are going to be going? And I'm going to make that prediction out loud to a friend. And then I'm going to be able to come back and hold myself accountable to, did I get it right? Did I not? So I practice this quite a bit. If I might be looking at, hey, where do I think that our company is going to go next? If it's a big company, hey, where do I think that the market is going to go? What do I think the current administration is going to do as far as regulations? Where do I think this technology is going to go? I'm just going to predict the future a little bit and see if I got it right or wrong. And that helps me be more comfortable with it. The other is the product metrics ladder. How can I relate everything that a product offers to how they make money? I'll go drive down the highway and I'll look at a business and I'll be like, okay, what do they offer? So they offer this kind of service, or they offer this kind of product, digital or physical. What is it that the customers are really buying? What are they trying to accomplish with that? Okay, so that's the next level. And then I'm like, okay, how much value is it that product helps them provide to that customer? And how much do I think that they'd be willing to pay? If I were to grow this business in some area, would I deepen the product offering for that same customer base? Would I extend it into a new customer base? And so you can think about it that way and do some of those. Books on strategic thinking, I like. Blue Ocean Strategy is a fun one to spur your creativity. It's not so practical. I would look at the other strategizer books that are out there of business model canvas, value proposition design. Those are the first ones that come to mind. The Lean Startup is an example of one that I like too. Now, I've got a list of probably 300 books that all fit in different categories. You can also DM me on LinkedIn and I can probably think of some more then. All right. Great chatting with everybody. I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.